Now let's turn to another aspect of China-U.S. relations, people-to-people exchanges. The U.S. issued an advisory asking its citizens to exercise increased caution in China due to a so-called heightened risk of arbitrary detention. It was issued on Saturday and did not specify what prompted the alert. This claim was slammed by the Chinese media as blatant distortion of the truth. Many claim the hostile attitude of the U.S. is a big challenge to international communication, and the harsh policies concerning education serves as one example. Last Monday, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement announced that foreign students on student visas will be barred from the U.S. this fall if their educational institution operates under an online-only course model amid the COVID-19 pandemic. 1 million international students risk being frozen out of the U.S. colleges. Will these tactics hurt the people-to-people exchanges between countries, particularly between China and the United States? Let's loop in our panelists, who are educators from both sides. For more discussion, we are joined in Medford, Joe Trachtman, who is a professor of international law at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy with Tufts University. In Philadelphia, Professor Marshall Meyer, Emeritus Professor of Management from Wharton School. Last but not least, in Beijing, Huang Jing, Dean of the Institute of International and Regional Studies from Beijing Language and Culture University, Professor Huang Jing. Thank you so much for the three of you joining us. Professor Huang, starting from you, there have been rumors coming from the United States side suggesting that Americans that are now in China are likely to be having a bigger chance to be detained. Professor Huang, who have been doing research about China-U.S. relations for decades, what is reality?
I think the rumors are just rumors because even without all those happenings, American citizens in China has to abide to Chinese laws. If you violate Chinese laws, of course you are going to be, dealt with accordingly. I do not believe, I don't see that why, and I don't see any reasons that China is going to do more than that.
On the other hand, we also have been hearing visa issue for international students if they do not have on-campus classes, they're likely to not have their visa or they're likely to be deported. Now, 30 to 40% of students inside the United States, international, actually are Chinese. So how do you see that also, whether there are inviting policies or at least not harsh policies against the Chinese students?
Of course. Well, I think it's extremely disruptive, and I think that the Trump administration wants to put pressure on American universities to have face-to-face classes and also wants to reject foreign students. The universities are fighting this very powerfully, my own and many others, and there are some possible legal grounds for reversing this policy, but it causes great uncertainty, and we just don't know exactly how it will be applied. They've said that as long as some courses are taken face-to-face, it may be possible. So a lot of universities are trying to develop special courses that students who happen to live here.
But on the other hand, Professor Meyer, maybe you know very well that as a result of COVID-19 and also the summer vacation, and many international students left the United States, including Chinese students. Now, with the U.S. current policy, without being an American citizen or other citizens with a green card, you cannot enter the border as a result of COVID-19. So that would mean a lot of international students cannot come back to the United States, even when the new term begins. So is this another complicated process of refusing international students, Professor Meyer?
As to the inability of foreign students to get back into the United States, this poses a terrific dilemma for U.S. universities, which have invested a great deal in extending themselves abroad and trying to increase the international mix of their student body. All of a sudden, they're caught struggling actually to serve their domestic students and trying to find ways to reach foreign students hoping they'll pay tuition, stay enrolled, and so forth. I think the damage to the U.S. universities is going to be substantial.
Right. Professor Huang, what about American students or international students coming into China? They're also having some difficulties because China has pretty much closed its border with just some various flights of agreements with various governments and airline companies.
In my university, over 55% of students are coming from overseas. Among them, about 1,000 students from the United States. There are two cases. One case is that some of U.S. students went home in January because that's exactly the winter vacation, and of course at that time the pandemic in China is running very high. So a lot of American students, as far as I know, most of them went home. And but there are some of them who are left behind, still here. They're all being tested, and just a few weeks ago, they all take online class because we've been doing online class ever since the school started, and most likely we're going to do so next semester. But for those remain in the United States, of course, they're not encouraged to come back. Actually, we tell them individually, each of them, that they're going to be fine. They can take online class as their schoolmates.
But how do you feel about the Chinese students now who you already enrolled in U.S. universities? I mean, Professor Huang, you yourself went to the United States and studied and work.
Yeah, there are about 5 of my students, seniors, last year in my class. 9 of them applied for American universities. 5 of them were admitted. They are in a kind of very tough situation because they got the admission letter, but I do not believe they can go. But one fact I have to share with my 2 colleagues here is that last year, among 17 seniors, Chinese seniors who took my class, 9 of them applied for American universities. But this year, there are 21 Chinese seniors who took exactly the same class of mine, but none of them applied to American universities. That was quite alarming to me. I did a little survey among those 21 students, saying why none of them applied for U.S. students. Two reasons, which is quite surprising. Number one is the hostile policies from U.S. government. Number 2 is that they don't feel secure.
Interesting. How do the other professors now in the U.S. react to what Professor Huang just said about the small survey he did among his 20 students? And what do you make of this prospect, really, that both of you have been contributing to exchanges between China and the United States education-wise?
Okay, I did a very small survey of a couple of friends, academics, Chinese. They said exactly what we just heard. U.S. is hostile to China, and many of the students feel unsafe. Whether this is true or not, I don't think matters. I think the perception is what's very important. I also talked to some younger friends who have children about to enter college, and their attitude was one of great disappointment. They'd hoped their child or children, several families, would come to college in the United States. And they're really disappointed that this is unlikely to be possible, at least in the next few years. And they hope it changes.
Very heavy stuff, I'm afraid, that we are talking about. Professor,
it is.
We remember when the 2 countries established diplomatic relations back in the 1970s, how much emphasis was being put on people-to-people exchanges. We also remember dearly the first batch of Chinese students being sent to the United States to study in U.S. universities, and how much change they have managed over the decades to bring to China with their personal efforts as well. So, Professor Huang, are we going to see the most important fabric of exchanges and relations between the two countries now becoming fragile and most vulnerable?
Yeah, I think I have three quick points to make. I myself benefited tremendously from the reform and the openness. I went to the United States in mid-1980s. I studied at Harvard and then taught at Harvard, Utah State, and Stanford. And then I worked at Brookings for about 5 years, and then went to Singapore, and now I'm in China. I think, at least from my own personal experiences, I think this is very beneficial for both countries. And the second is that I have to say with a very heavy heart is that I can see that image of the United States in China, especially among the Chinese youngsters, has been declined. There's kind of disillusion of the United States as a way to go, as a place people go there to learn and to kind of, to follow. That kind of thing has been greatly disillusioned, largely, I have to say, because of Trump administration. The third point I have to say is that before that, Chinese people, young or old, has a great impression, has a very positive, impression about the United States. But because the so-called soft power, because it has set up the kind of direction people can follow. But now that kind of feeling is gone.
I can feel the passion Professor Huang has about promoting relations between China and the United States, particularly at the academic and exchanges level between the peoples. The other two professors from the U.S., I know this is disheartening for all of you because Professor Meyer, you've been doing research about Chinese companies before the PRC was founded. And Professor Trachtman, I also know that you have been doing exchanges with the Chinese side over the years about various topics and academic directions. How much that you as academic leaders can, in a way, push for a change, either in policy or in attitude?
It's highly unlikely that the Trump administration will listen to academics. As individuals, we can, and I have, reached out to my colleagues, my friends in China, quite deliberately, reached out to colleagues here in the United States, share the interest in China, and probably the most important thing been able to do, and it took me a little while to do this, was to create in China a research team that can act in my place. I can't get there, but I've now got in place a small group of people based in Shanghai who are able to do the work inside firms that I would otherwise do, and then we all work together, guess what, on Zoom. So I think it's really important, small these threads may be, that we weave them together and try to create ongoing conversation, ongoing dialogue, ongoing learning. So when the time comes, we'll be able, again, to work collaboratively, face-to-face, both here in the U.S. And in China.
Right. Professor Trachtman.
Yes, for many years, the United States has welcomed foreign students, not for soft power purposes, but I think soft power really doesn't state the full dimension of the relationship. It's to really promote understanding abroad of the United States and hopefully admiration, at least observation, and hopefully admiration of the United States liberal system. And as we've been saying, the current administration has made that much, much more difficult. And so we can expect that there will be a decline in trust, and we'll have to work to rebuild the trust that can allow us to work together, because the Chinese-American relationship is fraught today with many security and economic and pandemic challenges. and at the bottom, person-to-person trust at the at the high level, but also at the medium and lower levels, is critical to be able to understand one another and to carry out collective policy as needed. So
Right.
this is really important.
And I'd like to add one small thing here, and to ask for a little forbearance in China. Here's why. We're having a presidential election. And this is a quadrennial event, not just the election, but bashing China. Every presidential candidate bashes China. I went back and looked. Mitt Romney was accused of bashing China. Bill Clinton bashed China. Hillary Clinton got in a tangle with President Xi during her campaign. So let's hope that some of this will moderate after the election is done, and hopefully U.S. positions change somewhat.
Professor Huang Jing, your take also.
So first and foremost, we have to distinguish the U.S. government and U.S. people. Of course, I will say that. And secondly, I also tell my students that it takes two to tango. We cannot just blame the United States, and China also have to reflect on its own behavior, its own action, to say what China has to change. So I think the recent speech by Foreign Minister Wang Yi is a good step towards that direction. First and foremost, of course, as we always say, that if we are in the hole, the first thing to get out of the hole is to stop digging. And I think that both sides have to stop digging. Having said that, I think that if both sides has a willingness to improve the relationship, we can do that. We can do that step by step. And first and foremost, of course, we have to really improve the current situation in terms of the bilateral exchanges among the scholars, students in the societies, to try to build up the confidence and the goodwill of two peoples. I think that's the first step to do. And the second thing we have to do is that we do have to open up on both sides, including China, so that we have more opportunities, more windows, more ways to understand each other, to tell each other our stories. And last but not the least, of course, our educators has a mission to tell the youngsters, tell our students that it will be disastrous, absolute disastrous, if two largest power on earth went to in a kind of confrontation.
I want to really thank you, all of you professors, for being straightforward and also being very sincere when you are talking about the real exchanges between the two countries and your relations with your students, no matter that they're coming from China or the United States. We want to thank you for your work throughout the years. Really appreciate it. And that's all we have for today. If you'd like to see more, you can certainly search our program World Insight or check out our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for watching.